Welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. Steve Schmidt here, joined by Ryan Lizza. Ryan is a veteran journalist who has just departed Politico. He made the announcement yesterday and debuted on Substack, Telos.news. I'm going to ask Ryan to explain what Telos is. He can tell us about Aristotle and all the deeper meanings
That's the danger of
philosophically
using.
of the word. Ryan is one of the very best political reporters of the last 20 years. Brilliant, insightful person, was the chief correspondent at Politico, and he has announced that he will be starting up a new news organization, Telos. And I'm just going to read um, from the beginning of it so you have an idea here. And it says, on waking up, some news. I recently left Politico, where I've served as the chief Washington correspondent since 2019. The main reason, their style of political coverage is not meeting the unprecedented moment of democratic peril we are facing. I know that sounds dramatic, but the gap between what is actually happening in Washington and how it was being framed and reported became much too wide. This new publication, Telos, is my modest attempt to do things better. I don't mean to pick on my friends in the media. All the people and institutions on Trump's enemies list are struggling with how to respond. Frankly, it took me too long to realize how bad things are. My moment of extreme clarity came during Trump's assault on the law firm Paul Weiss. It didn't receive much attention at the time, but in his executive order attacking the firm, the president criticized but did not name a Paul Weiss partner who brought a pro bono suit against individuals alleged to have participated in, and here really pay close attention to the tortured euphemisms, the events that occurred at or near the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. That unnamed lawyer is Jeannie Rhee. The suit that she helped bring was against the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers for, as she described it, with justifiable pride in a 2023 interview, their role in planning out and carrying the deadly January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Paul Weiss was also proud of her work. On its website, the firm celebrated her victory in a companion case. We are,
Should I flip this around?
yep, you're going to flip to Ryan
Yeah, like that.
like that. And we are trying to figure out how to deal with the phone. One of our greatest hopes as Substack users is that the leadership at Substack will make it possible soon for us to not have to use the phones like this. It seems that Substack leadership is often on the front end of making technological changes and developments. But as a prominent Substacker, guys, this is a clusterfuck, and I urge you to fix it as soon as possible. At any rate, the Proud Boys are a white supremacist group that has a penchant for violence. As part of their reign of terror, the Proud Boys targeted Metropolitan African Methodist Episcopal Church in a racist attack on December 12, 2020, just 3 weeks before the January 6, 21 insurrection. More than 700 Proud Boys descended on D.C. for a Stop the Steal rally that they extended into a night march, attacking black churches, including Metropolitan AME, and destroying banners expressing support for the Black Lives Matter movement. Paul Weiss, joined by our partners, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law and the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs, quickly came to the church's aid, or at least they were proud. Here's what you get when you click on that link now, and that link is gone. The original webpage is gone. Memory hole deleted from the firm's own accounting of its historic success. So you wrote a story about Paul Weiss disappearing its history. You said in the opening paragraph of that story that you were leaving Politico because you thought and said that journalism that is necessary in this moment needs to be created from outside the institution that you worked at. And tell me what happened next. You got a letter from a Politico attorney telling you to take down this story.
Well, first of all, Steve, thank you for having me here. This is a
Yeah.
real turning of the tables moment. Here I am on the with your massive audience. The last time we did this, I was at Politico, and you were on my podcast. And I really appreciate, first of all, the conversations we had over the last few months in terms of what a great platform Substack is. And you've really helped me think through whether going independent was the right thing for me. So thanks, and it's good to see you. The last night, I wrote a story about this morning. Last night, I received a couple of phone calls from a number I didn't recognize, and they left two messages. It seemed very urgent. There was a little bit of a technical issue that the person who left the message didn't complete, didn't the first part of their message didn't come through, and so it was garbled. And all I heard was something about a violation, and that I needed to take it down immediately. And I thought, what the fuck are they talking about? Take what down? 20 minutes later, I got a letter explaining that Politico was demanding that an entire 1,800 word article that was frankly mostly about criticism of the press broadly, in terms of how it's covering the Trump administration, but more specifically, criticism of the Trump administration. That's what that piece is about. That piece is about the Trump administration's unprecedented weaponization of the government, and how we as journalists need to wake up to the fact that that is the crisis that is underway in Washington, and we need to devote all of the incredible resources and powers that we have as journalists and as billion-dollar media companies, covering that, framing it, reporting on it in a way that um, is useful to the American people to make sense of. Um, and at the core of our coverage, um, highlighting that this isn't just some little fight between political combatants that we're used to in American politics. That at the heart of it is the erosion and attack on our democracy. And I know that's very dramatic. I know people, say, "Oh, you're part of the resistance now. You're being so dramatic about all of this stuff." But saying what is actually happening is the most important thing we do as journalists. So that was the essay yesterday, and in a small way, I want Telos to be a model for that kind of reporting. And we have big plans. Big plans for expansion. We're starting out very small. I've been covering this town, Steve, as you know, for almost 30 years, and a lot of people in my position who go from kind of the insider newsletter world at Politico, they go and start new insider newsletters. So the last people in my job started Punchbowl News, excellent reporting product on Capitol Hill. Before that, someone started Axios. These are basically companies that are guide insider guides to Washington for corporations, lobbyists, other people on the Hill. They generate income by advertising from Lockheed Martin or Google, all the big companies that have business before the government. Nothing wrong with that model. No shade about that. But at this moment, I think what's needed is for people who have been inside the system, covering it for as long as I have, helping people outside Washington understand what the hell is going on. And so that's what Tellus is going to be about. And I will say, quite disappointed that the reaction from Politico was not great. We're really glad to see alums doing their thing, but was we want you to delete the entire 1,800 word article, or we might sue you.
And your position on that is obviously, judging by your response, no, you will not be deleting the article.
I mean, not to sound like Steve Schmidt here, but my position on that is they can go fuck themselves. I'm not going to delete an 1,800 word article about criticizing Donald Trump because it has a few lines in it that Politico doesn't like. They're putting themselves in the position of going bat, frankly, for the Trump administration. They're putting themselves in the position of carrying water for the Trump administration by asking me to take down an article that is critical of this president and his administration. So, no,
And this
I'm not
is
going to be,
and
I'm
this
not
is
taking it
a
down.
and this is I feel at some level that you were one of the few that could achieve with your launch, which was a very interesting, good story, but that now it's become a massive journalism scandal. As you move into your second day at Telos, and this is what this is, and I want everybody to understand this. Who's watching? The executive editor of Politico, John Harris, is making a demand, right, through his lawyers. He's the responsible officer at the organization. Same deal with Pete Hegseth. He's the responsible officer at the Department of Defense. John Harris is the responsible officer of Politico. He's the executive editor. Politico is a foreign owned news organization. It's German owned. It's owned by a company named Axel Springer. I'll talk about Axel Springer as we go on. But John Harris has made a demand through the lawyer that you take down a story that savages through facts, in my view, Paul Weiss, a massive law firm that's managing partner Brad Karp has capitulated to Donald Trump, bent the knee, and has erased, as you document the firm's history, in a Stalin-esque purge of its legacy, of its history. And what makes it worse for Paul Weiss is this was the firm that allowed Jews and Gentiles to practice together. So
Your
this
very
was
proud
a
history.
firm. This was a firm steeped in history. And so Politico, owned by Axel Springer, who started a news organization in divided Berlin that was committed to democracy, has demanded, with its $1 billion purse, that you, Ryan Liz, on Substack must delete what you wrote, lest you be sued by Politico. And they're a news organization that will be celebrating itself this weekend at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Do I have that right?
That's right. The core irony here is that the article was about the Trump administration pressuring Paul Weiss into deleting some of its proudest moments in its history from its own website and pressuring its top partners from rewriting their own biographies to delete their proudest achievements, including this poor woman, Ree, who was a top prosecutor at the Justice Department and helped Mueller uh, put away in prison some top Trump campaign officials. That's all gone now from Paul Weiss's website. That was the original reporting that I did in that piece. They want, they want the whole piece to be deleted. And so the irony here, if you can call it that, of asking a journalist to delete reporting about the Trump administration, asking a law firm to delete reporting, is rather rich. And Steve, I want to, I wrote this response today, laying this all out, and I want to read Axel Springer's own um, their own um, mission statement, which I always thought was rather impressive, and it made me very proud when I knew that this was the mission statement of Axel Springer to work there. At Axel Springer, freedom is not just a value, it is our guiding principle. We stand firm in its defense, recognizing that freedom is the catalyst for progress in business, in society, and especially in journalism. And so I asked my friends at Politico, uh, Matthias Dofner, John Harris, Jonathan Greenberger, to read that very, very carefully, to read their own mission statements about what the company means, and to think very carefully if they want to go down this road of trying to censor a journalist because of a few lines in the piece that they found overly critical and they allege violate some boilerplate language in a contract about non-disparagement.
Well, let me add on about Axel Springer, and I don't know if during your career at Politico you ever had the opportunity to go to the Axel Springer building in Berlin.
I never did. I've
So,
heard a lot about it, so people will probably be fascinated about this story, Steve. So tell it.
so the Axel Springer building in Berlin is truly one of the most extraordinary buildings I've ever entered, and it is a stunning building. I have never, and I mean ever, seen a newsroom the likes of the Axel Springer setup.
Yeah, I've heard
But
this.
the building, literally through the lobby, is where the Berlin Wall ran. And Axel Springer built this building up against the Berlin Wall. And everybody out there who has a lack of faith about what happens in the end, this is a story about faith. Axel Springer built his building against the Berlin Wall because he believed one day that wall would come down and his building would be at the center of Berlin, which
Yeah,
it most certainly is. And so if you go up to Matthias Dofner's office, on the top floor, you can see the Berlin Wall segment signed by Ronald Reagan, by President Bush 41, by Mikhail Gorbachev. And so this organization is not neutral on the great question of the day about democracy, at least in Germany.
it's
Maybe
100%
they
true.
are indifferent about it in the United States because Matthias Dofner is not an American. He is an Atlanticist, but maybe all of the subscription money that Politico generates from the federal government, which was not covered accurately by most of the media when that story came out, has changed his mind. But John Harris and Jonathan Greenberger are not Germans. They are Americans. And John Harris, as the editor of Politico, should have a passing familiarity with the First Amendment. And I want to say to all of you who are listening to this, subscribe right now to Telos. Hit the button, follow, and support Ryan's journalism because we're going to need more of it to get through this. There is another journalist that I helped introduce on Substack named Tara Palmieri, also a political writer, and Tara wrote a story on hers, The Red Letter, and I urge everybody to subscribe to The Red Letter. The details the meeting between Donald Trump and Laura Loomer in the White House. And it's a story where Tara Palmieri interviews Laura Loomer and approaches it from the perspective of this 31-year-old conspiracy theorist is one of the most powerful people in the country. She has a pass to the White House that comes through Donald Trump. She walked into the Oval Office with a folder full of conspiracies, and she got half the National Security Council staff fired. Now, I read the New York Times this morning, and I find their coverage to be Walter Duranty like. But what the New York Times coverage talks about this morning is the fact that, well, there may be some cracks in the well-oiled Trump machine running the White House, with the evidence being Pete Hegseth, and you really can't paper it anymore. And I'm like, wait a second. This is a story that's telling me that Susie Wiles is a competent chief of staff and the Trump White House is a well-oiled machine, and that everything is working there the way it ought to be. And I know that's not true. I know that New York Times reporter is writing that to gain favor from whomever his anonymous sources are, which is the currency of the business, to please his editors. But what they're reporting is the sun is rising in the west and setting in the east. It's not true. Tara Palmieri understands that when Laura Loomer goes into the Oval Office, that it's a significant event, that she's a powerful person, and she interviews her. But the idea that the Trump White House functions with any degree of normalcy is fiction. It's a lie. It's not true. And so I just think that in this moment, I look at the two things. The paper of record reports things that are just objectively not true, in the same way that they did with regarding Stalin in the 1930s in Ukraine. No famine to see here. And then you report about Paul Weiss, major law firm, abdicating its fiduciary responsibility to the idea of the rule of law, the whole thing. And you get a letter from people that call themselves journalists. They say, you better take this down or else we'll sue you. A news organization that would then be doing the bidding of the billion-dollar law firm, which capitulated to Trump and to Trump. Honest to God, it's the most astonishing correspondence in 30 years of doing this I've ever seen between any news organization and a journalist that worked in the news organization. And my question, I'm looking right in the camera. John Harris, if you think that you do not have to answer for this, if you're that arrogant, and I'm talking Trump level arrogance, and I know John Harris is that arrogant, you don't have to comment on it. You have to answer for this letter, John Harris. This is a vital moment. And so, like, I just want to say, as you get going and you begin your reporting, and thank God you're at it, what do we look forward to from next? Like, what area are you going to start to go down to when you look at the weaponization, right, of government against people? Like, where are you drawn to look?
I would say a couple of things. I just want to comment on a couple of things you said, Steve. I should point out that the final line of that letter last night was, "We reserve all rights." Obvious lawyer language of, we may take the next step
Right,
and sue you. Just so your viewers are clear that there was not the explicit, "We are going to sue you if you don't
right.
do X, Y, and Z." It's all
Well,
it's all
listen,
implied. But you know what it's like.
it's
I
an
just want to be very
intimidation
careful.
letter. It's an
Absolutely. It's an intimidation
it
letter.
is
Yeah,
a news organization,
it's trying to scare me.
a major national news organization, unambiguously sent a letter of intimidation to an American journalist who is on the front line of covering the story of Trump intimidation. Right. And so they sent you a letter trying to intimidate you to pull down a story documenting intimidation. I find that very alarming.
It's alarming, and it's also just stupid because, do they really think I was going to delete the article? They didn't think that was going to raise a few questions and, create a controversy. So my view of this is, I'm hoping that this was a big mistake, a big misunderstanding. Sometimes in these big companies, people on the corporate side do things without checking and do things that violate the news values of the institution. And I am hoping that cooler heads prevail, Steve, and that my friends over there realize this was a mistake and apologize and withdraw that threat. I will tell your listeners, our viewers here, something else that's slightly awkward in all this. I'm scheduled on Saturday to be Politico's guest at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I'm scheduled to go with them. They invited me to their pre-party and to
You should wear a
the
white tux in protest, like a full white tux.
so my view is that cooler heads will prevail, and by this weekend, there will be an apology, and we will be able to put this behind us because I don't think any news organization wants to be in the position when they really think about what they're doing here of censoring a journalist and demanding him that he memory hole an article about the Trump administration pressuring a law firm to memory hole their own history. I don't think they want to erase my very modest attempt to make a living through Telos and the article that introduced that. I don't think that they, if they really think about it, that that's what they want. But that is their official position as we sit here right now. To answer your other question, look, I as you laid out, reading very generously, reading from the piece I wrote yesterday, Steve. Um, to me, the core issue of what's going on in Washington, the crisis is an administration that is weaponizing the state against the American people. And I know that sounds scary and dramatic to people, but sometimes it needs to be said as clearly as that so people understand what's going on. And we can sit here and rattle off the 50 different examples that we've seen over the last few months. That's the story. And there's a lot of, frankly, bullshit that goes on in Washington that gets far too much attention at the expense of that core story. That's it. That when we talk about the erosion of democracy, that is like where the rubber hits the road. That is how democracy is being eroded, right? We we um we have a president that is using every tool of the federal government he can get his hand on, every lever, all this machinery that he didn't understand how it worked the first time around. He's got his hands on all of it, and he's using it to target the press, to target law firms, to target universities, to target immigrants, um, to target, frankly, all of the institutions and people that are the hardest to defend. Who wants to defend journalists? They're not popular. Who wants to defend, elite Washington law firms? Nobody. Who wants to defend, Ivy League schools? They're not popular. So there is a sort of political sophistication to this targeting, in that, as always with regimes like this, you go after people and institutions that are difficult to defend. Um, so that's I call the publication Telos, which is the Greek word, excuse me, is the Greek word for aim, mission. And it's a little precious, but I wanted something that reminded me as a journalist why I got into this business in the first place, and reminded me that journalism should, when we're practicing it at our best, it should be mission oriented. And that's how I like to describe Telos, is mission oriented journalism. And we're going to write about the weaponization of government. I have a big piece coming. This little drama today and yesterday has delayed it. I think it'll be out now next Tuesday. I have a 9,000 word investigation coming,
Hmm.
Steve, on this subject that I think helps explain some of the roots of what we're seeing in Washington. So everyone should look out for that. And I have a couple of other pieces on this subject lined up in the next few weeks.
Telos is going to be an extraordinary addition to the canon of the media of this era when we look back on it. When fearless people stood up and told the American people the truth about what was happening. And Ryan Lizza is one of those people. And I urge everybody who's listening, you can find Ryan on Substack at Telos. This is a most significant time in the country's history. And I'm just going to say, something real quick and just respond to something that you said when you wrote and you were a little hard on yourself and you say, well, I should have seen this coming a little bit sooner. And I don't think you should be hard on yourself in that way. And I talk about this a lot because nobody saw this coming earlier than me. And and I don't judge people because people respond to danger in different ways in different moments. But I know I was right about a couple of things. And I want to mention two of them right now as we go forward. When Sean Spicer walked out on inauguration day, I said, "Uh-oh, that's a big deal." Because that is a lie about authority, not a lie about a blowjob. When Bill Clinton lies about a blowjob, he does that because he's embarrassed. Donald Trump made Sean Spicer go out there and say something that was absurd and untrue because he was testing and probing a proposition 8 years ago, and now we're down the river. And the proposition is what's true, is what the leader says is true. And George Orwell tried to tell us about this in 1984 as he gets to the torture scene at the end, where Winston, being tortured by the party official, says, "But you're only holding four fingers up." And the party official says, "It could be four, or it could be three, or it could be whatever the party tells you it is." And so lies of authority are what started all of this in the first instant. And so as time has gone on, the encroachments, the lies, the abuses, the rule flouting, all of it has accumulated into an insanity that is fully revealed now, right? The Easter message, where
Yeah.
immigrants are
Yeah.
scapegoated, where the Lugan press, as Hitler would have said, the lying press is attacked, all of it is perfectly obvious. And so Sebastian Gorka, sitting in the White House, said, and this applies to me, he said, if you defend a terrorist, Mr. Garcia, a father from Maryland who was picking up his autistic son, from being imprisoned in an El Salvadoran gulag, you are a terrorist. And as a terrorist, you can be sent to the El Salvadoran gulag for protesting the sending of Mr. Garcia to the gulag. And Sebastian Gorka is not only a Nazi, and he wore a Nazi medallion, a Hungarian fascist badge to the first inauguration, the Hungarian Nazi Party. Elon Musk's Nazi salute was real. That's what it was. Um, and so all of these people who have said these things, I don't have any evidence, and no one at the New York Times has ever had any evidence that they don't mean it. Um, why do you think so many reporters, over and over again, when these people have said, we mean this, have decided that it's necessary to have, let's say, Scott Jennings on CNN to interpret it and say, no, he actually means the exact opposite. Like, where does that inclination come from? And where did journalism break that these panels, which exist primarily to refute what you just heard, where did this come from?
Look, this is I think this is something that will resonate with you, with you, Steve. A friend of mine, his analogy. He was in Iraq, and he was in uh, saw a lot of bad shit in Iraq, and saw cycles of his comrades who got killed replaced by new soldiers. And so he got to watch up close the reaction of new soldiers because there was so much churn in his platoon. Um, encountering the horrors of close-up combat for the first time. And what he realized was, he saw this again and again, was the first time that some of these soldiers witnessed being shot at, explosions, the full horrors of war for the first time. A common reaction was to deny that it was happening at all. It always stuck with me because I always thought that was such a human instinct when faced with an existential threat, to just not be able to wrap your head around the fact that what's happening is actually happening. And he used to tell this story in different circumstances to explain, sometimes what's happening is actually happening. And that's the psychology I think is has taken hold in a lot of law firms, a lot of newsrooms, a lot of universities. There's a denial about what's going on because it's so uncomfortable once you acknowledge the truth here. um, and getting over that denial and realizing what's happening is actually happening is the kind of important first step to wake up as a I think as a journalist covering Washington, to be clear-eyed about that, and um, not be concerned with having an argument from both sides, when what you really want to be concerned with is being intellectually honest. Intellectual honesty should be our guide, and that's not it's not taught when you sort of come up as a political reporter. A lot of people get into political reporting because they like politics. They like ad
Mhm.
campaigns and polling, and you know this world better than anyone, Steve. You love that world. They like
Huh?
the combats of two political campaigns, and I love that stuff too. I hope, but at some point, Tellus gets back to just good old fashioned political reporting, and we can talk about polling and ads and the primaries and the campaigns. But right now, there is a crisis, and it needs to be described clearly. That's the first step for people solving it, and it needs to be framed in a way that can help people do something about it, rather than just throw their hands up because everything is reported as an intriguing tennis match between two political combatants.
So
So I
I
Go ahead.
think, I mean, I think, talking about 2028, right? To this end, right, politically, um, Gretchen Whitmer may be a great governor of Michigan. I honestly, I have no idea. I don't live in Michigan. I know she ran on fixing the roads. People seem to like her, but under fire, and she was in a way in the Oval Office. Trump, the president, is announcing retributions in the Oval Office, and Gretchen Whitmer, right, on the spot. You have to react. There's no staff, right? This is Gretchen Whitmer, the leader. It's a moment of testing. I've had a couple of these in my life. I jumped off a boat to save someone in the Hudson River. I walked into a fire. You have to make decisions, right? That was Gretchen Whitmer's decision. I'm going to hide behind my blue folder, right? Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson are writing a book about the Democratic cover-up of Joe Biden's condition, and Tim Waltz goes on, and question is, what say you, right? Why did Trump win? And it's just completely incoherent. So I think, right, the threshold question: you want to run
Yeah.
for president? Why did Trump win? To every Democrat, and it's a 30-second answer. It requires honesty. Um, what's the nature of the threat? Right, requires coherence. And what are you going to do about it? And so, like, I had on Congressman Jake Auchincloss last week. Why isn't he a top tier presidential candidate? Right, by on the list. He didn't need to check with 50 advisors. He's completely coherent, absolutely has a vision. I said, if you were running for president, I say if you were president, what would you do here? And the answers were extraordinarily compelling to me. When you look at these candidates in 2028, to me, what you're talking about is the absolute threshold table stakes issue is can you answer the first question of the campaign? And so far, you've had three candidates that are top tier in my estimation, and I feel like I got a lot of experience in it. Commit harikari in the preliminary stage here. So as you look to 2028, I think you're one of the most astute observers of this stuff that there is. Like, what do you see as kind of the threshold table stakes? So I don't think any of these people that
Yeah.
are on the kind of mainstream corporate media lists right now of these are the front runners, right, are the front runners. None of them, with the
Yeah.
exception of AOC, who will be a big factor in the race.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's going to be it's going to be wide, it's going to be wide open. There are going to be people who capture the imagination of a very frustrated, disappointed Democratic Party base right now who come out of nowhere. And that, that happens anyway. That happens every cycle. I remember 2004 when Howard Dean, nobody knew who he was, and he became the main challenger to the establishment candidate John Kerry. That's going to happen. I will say this, and I'm a journalist. The truth is what matters the most to me in reporting. I will certainly acknowledge in politics that the Democratic candidates will have to make judgments about how much what we're talking about here and what we're concerned about here, how much politically how to talk about that politically. I'll give you an example that I've been thinking about recently. There will be a coordinated effort to get by Trump's allies in the midterm elections next year to get every Democratic candidate on record about whether they want Trump impeached or not. The idea behind that will be to argue that if you give Democrats control of the House and or Senate, they'll waste their time with investigations and impeachment of Donald Trump. I just putting on my political hat on. I think that's a tough that's a tough question for Democrats to answer. I think there are plenty of things Democrats could point to say this man should be impeached. This is what the impeachment clause was meant for. Um, I don't know one way or another if that's good politics for them. And so that's on my mind a little bit, Steve, because I think it helps. It will help determine how some of these Democratic primary candidates in 2028 talk about what we're talking about right now and articulate in a clear way. This is the problem. This is the danger. But we can do something about it. And by the way, it's not the only problem. Addressing, the everyday issues that people care about. I do think that's always the problem with leaders like Trump. Look at Hungary. Look at any country that's had democratic backsliding with an authoritarian or a wannabe authoritarian. You can do a lot of shit in power if you keep the trains running on time, if you keep inflation in check, if you have the economy humming along. A lot of voters just look back at the first 4 years of the Trump administration and they didn't give a shit about what Sean Spicer said on the first day about the crowd size and how that was a harbinger of all the horrors to come. They looked back at it, right, and they thought, oh yeah, well the economy was a little bit better back then. Joe Biden is barely seems alive. Don't much like his replacement. Let's give Trump a shot, right? There were a sliver of people who decided the election who thought that. Um, and so I do think that Trump's in a different situation right now in terms of his recklessness when it comes to things like the economy. But we should never underestimate the what authoritarians in otherwise with peace and prosperity, what they can get away with, and how you have to address both things.
Well, one thing that is certainly to be true in this coming election cycle is the economy is going to be in a terrible mess. And
That would be a
so,
big, yeah,
right. So,
absolutely. That's what is different. I mean, he's wrecking the economy. So in some sense, it's not the Orban model, who, when he came into power, he did a few things that people appreciated, right? That allowed him to take advantage of, and take control of things. Putin's the same story. I mean, right? Like, you can't fully get to the Putin level without keeping your eye on, making sure people's basic necessities are taken care of, right? There's a lot of like wannabe dictators who don't get to that point because they didn't take care of the basics. That's sort of my point. But what you're saying,
yeah.
what you're
And
about to say, Steve, is Trump's going to wreck the economy.
yeah, I mean, he is. Listen, I used to do a fair amount of skydiving. And when you pull the ripcord, right, you don't go up. Right. I know that like in the video, it looks like the parachute goes up. When you pull the
And you get
ripcord,
yanked.
you're
Yeah,
still falling down, right? So
yeah,
having
yeah.
an
I've jumped a
argument
couple of
about
times,
what's
so I know
going to
what you're talking
happen
about.
in the economy is like having an argument with somebody who's telling you you're going up while you're going down, right? Gravity does its thing.
Yeah,
Um, when you look at the totality of this moment, the really the benefit, the number one thing that Donald Trump has going for him is the Democratic leadership of the United States Senate, right? And so,
I
and it's
don't
not
disagree.
we're not talking about Democrats, but no serious, in my view, opposition party that has a meeting with 48 people in it, whatever, 46, however many are in the Democratic caucus, that goes into a meeting and emerges from it. Chuck Schumer's our guy. We'll follow him everywhere. Is just not serious. And I think that one of the dynamics you're seeing out in the country is that the opposition movement is not controlled by the Democratic National Committee. In
Absolutely,
fact, it's a reaction to the Democratic National Committee against the Democratic leadership in many ways, just as it is against the Trump administration, right? And so there is no opposition in Washington. And I just wonder, when you talk to Democrats in Washington, if they see it that way, if they appreciate the degree to which they are held in contempt, right, by their Democratic constituents in all over the country.
look, I wouldn't say, they all do. I mean, there are a lot of, most Democrats in Congress are in comfortable seats with no fear of losing, right? Senate and House. And so when you get to that level of comfort, your life in Washington becomes about Washington. Not to say they don't do things for the constituents, but they don't have those kind of, they're not as sensitive to political pressures back home anymore. Um, and so, but on the other hand, if you're not aware, as just like a smart, elite in Washington who's been paying attention for the last decade, if you're not aware of the absolute uprising against, elites in both parties, and against, uh, institutions, you're just sort of sleepwalking through what's going on in America. And so, I think even the candidates in the safest districts, or in the senators who, just live in the Washington bubble, are, at least dimly aware that there's a populist convulsions that have been rocking the country for a long time now, and a long time, in an economy that hasn't been, let's just say, an economy that could be a lot worse. And when it gets a lot worse, imagine, what it's going to be like in both parties.
That's what I think Democrats are missing, and that's why I'm so intrigued by the David Hogg project, right? And he can get a lot of these guys out. I think it's a good thing that he's doing, but um, look, you have a political party that I think looks at the moment and says we're going to benefit because of all of the things that Trump is doing and the rejection of the voters to that. And I think that's true. There won't be any safe seats or very few in 2026, right? But there's going to be a lot of Democratic incumbents that lose in primaries,
Primaries. Yeah.
and I hope
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
ordinary people, right, that are out there that can go and revert to some common sense, to the idea that you have to embrace disagreement and sit and work some things out eventually after we stop this. I'll give you a perfect example.
Yeah.
Like in Iowa, Joni Ernst. Joni Ernst ran as a farmer, famous ad, talking about I castrate the hogs on the farm. I'm going to go to Washington and cut spending, which obviously she didn't do. What she did do is go to Washington, get a glam makeover, and then bang the chief lobbyist of the United States Navy, a two-star admiral. She was banging him. And she was banging the chief lobbyist of the Air Force, a two-star general. And both those two-star officers were demoted, right, because of the inappropriate relationship with the United States Senator. They were disciplined, right, by their military branches, right? This has all been reported in the news. So somebody needs to go talk to Iowa voters in English, right? And says, this lady screwed every one of you over. She doesn't represent you, right? On Tuesday night, she's banging the Air Force general, right? On Wednesday night, she's got the Navy admiral over, and the rest of the week, she's doing whatever Trump told her to do.
Can I
And
just pause
so,
for a second here? So
yep,
I'm not familiar with this. Is it your view that this is what was partly what was
100%.
hanging
This
over her
is this
votes
is
for confirmation
this is
of
a woman. This is a woman who put the word sexual assault survivor, right, as the predicate to her U.S. Senate service. She ran as a farmer. Then, during the Me Too movement, she got on board. I'm a sexual assault survivor, right? And so, all through the Trump presidency, she distanced herself while embracing every element of it. But I'm a sexual assault survivor. So, no, I'm not for Trump and all of these things, right? And she's danced that game. So, this story came out immediately after she votes as the deciding vote to confirm Pete Hegseth. So, this is a combat veteran who's banging two flag officers who are disciplined by it, was blackmailed over it, voted for Hegseth, and now we have this drunk Secretary of Defense, completely unfit, giving away the war plans during active military operations. So, like, I know how
when
to
you put it
make
all
that
like that,
ad,
Steve. When you put it all like that, it does sound pretty bad.
right? So, I know how to run that ad campaign in Iowa, right? I'll translate it from my native New Jersey, right, to Iowa. But the
Yeah.
campaigns ahead with these people, because they're all scumbags, every one of them, right? They need to go. And yeah, someone just said it's bad. The question on impeachment to me is this: if I
Yeah.
was
How would
giving
you
advice to
advise?
say,
How would you advise Democrats to deal with that?
I would say you give me 67 senators, he's gone,
You'd lean into
right?
it.
Right? Lean into it. Say, but I would go explicitly to the American people and say reject the labels, right? Of this is a red state, this is a blue state. They're all American states, right? We need to accumulate the requisite number of votes to remove people from power who are unfit and dangerous. So there are three that come to mind. I wouldn't run on impeaching Trump. but I might think about running on impeaching Pam Bondi, on impeaching Kristi Noem, on impeaching Pete Hegseth, and putting it out there, right? And so
People who are more unpopular than Trump.
what I think today is I'm in Istanbul today, and I was talking to a gentleman earlier today about this and about Elon Musk. Elon Musk's fate is sealed. I don't know if he appreciates this, but we will win this fight. The side that is for American democracy. We're not Russia. We have a 250-year-old tradition of democracy and the U.S. Constitution. It's not going to go up in smoke in 100 days. But to the point about what's happened, there are people that are making a run at the Constitution with a knife in their hand, dipped in poison. Now, they're coming to kill it and burn it, and it's underway. We're watching it happen. Elon Musk is a Nazi. And the way that I know that is the 3 Nazi salutes he gave within 3 hours of the inauguration. And then I look for further clues, right? Does he have any relatives who are Nazis? Oh, he does, right? His grandparents were Canadian Nazis, and they moved to South Africa because the Reich was reduced to ashes, which is how the MAGA movement will end up, on the ash heap of history. That being said, the people who made the run, they're going to lose their companies, right? Meta will be broken up with antitrust actions. Google, all of these big tech oligarchs will pay the price, but none more so than Musk, who will not go to Mars, who will not be part of going to Mars, who will not be a defense contractor, and whose car company will go broke. And the best part about it is it's going to go broke with the Chinese electric car company putting it out of business. And I never thought that I would buy a Chinese electric car, but I also never thought I'd be a Jewish Democrat living in Toronto part time. So anything is possible. But Elon Musk, and all of these people, and asked Congressman Auchincloss about this, and whether it's any one of a dozen of different names that you could give, you kind of say, well, has any thought been given to that you're going to be testifying before a Democratic Congress in 18 months, right?
Yeah.
Under oath, right? You think it's going to all be wrapped up by then? And it's not going to be. And so, right, this is a time where people are digging in. Um, that was my first anti-Semitic comment. Someone tell me you were a Jewish Republican, Steve. No, I was a Catholic Republican. Now I'm a Jewish Democrat.
But
Um,
Steve, I've got to, I've got,
the
I can't keep Don Lemon waiting, so
yeah,
I've got to jump
yeah,
at one. So let's wrap up.
right. So we want to get going. You got to go to Don Lemon. What I was saying is, hell of a fight ahead, and journalism, real journalism that tells you things that bad people are doing. They don't want you to know about the bad things they're doing. That's journalism, right? Holding the public to, giving the public the information they need to hold these people to account. That's journalism. And that's why all of you should be following Ryan Lizza at Telos. Big investigative report coming out next Tuesday, Ryan said. And
You're
Ryan,
gonna
let you
love this
wrap it up
piece.
here.
You're gonna love this piece, Steve. You're gonna love it. I've been working on for a while. It's part memoir, part investigative reporting, and it's about a fraud at the center of the MAGA movement that's been going on for years. And this is going to be, it's going to, everything so far has been free. This is going to be a paid piece. So I'm really going to be testing here whether this model on Substack works. whether people will support and pay for this kind of investigative reporting. Takes a lot of it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and there are always serious threats of legal actors. I didn't think that my former
Politico
employer
would be one of
would be
them.
one of those. I was more worried about the people I'm covering. So I probably need to talk to a lawyer about a few things. But anyway, I appreciate you exposing me to
You
your
you've been doing it for
passionate
one day. You
audience.
got Politico after you. You got Trump after you. You're doing something right. Ryan Lizza, everybody follow Ryan Lizza at Telos. Take
Thanks, man.
care.
I'll see you very soon.
You got it.
All right. Bye, guys.